News alert, new updates on the death of wrestling legend Hulk Hogan. TMZ is reporting Hogan may have been a victim of medical malpractice. Senior national correspondent Kevin Cork has more. Kevin.
Pretty crazy story, my friend. The Clearwater, Florida Police Department says tonight the investigation into Hulk Hogan's death is ongoing even now. And that's because Hogan may have been the victim of medical malpractice, which may have cost him his life, according to sources connected to the case. Law enforcement sources tonight tell TMZ that an occupational therapist was present at the wrestling legend's home in Florida when he stopped breathing. And according to a report, the therapist suggested in a recent operation, a surgeon may have severed Hogan's phrenic nerve, which controls the diaphragm, which is the primary muscle responsible for breathing. As of this hour, Hogan's body has not yet been cremated, and while his widow, Sky, says an autopsy has been conducted, we don't know what the findings were. In a statement, Clearwater Police tonight say the unique nature of this case has required us to interview multiple witnesses and seek medical records from a variety of providers. And our detectives continue to do that. All of this takes time.
When the unthinkable happened and Hulk Hogan passed away, no one could have predicted what the FBI would uncover behind the gates of his mansion. Secrets buried for years, dark and unexpected, sent shockwaves through the world. From stolen treasures to a hidden life no one knew about. This isn't the Hulk Hogan you think you know.
Just before 10 a.m. today, Clearwater Fire and Rescue along with the Clearwater Police Department responded to a house in the 1000 block of El Dorado Avenue for a medical-related call. It was discovered at that time Terry Balea, also known as Hulk Hogan, was experiencing a serious medical-related issue. Personnel provided medical treatment at that time and transported Mr. Balea to Morton Plant Hospital, where he died at 11:17 a.m. The Clearwater Police Department is conducting a death investigation, which is standard in these types of cases. There are no signs of foul play or suspicious activity related to this call for service at this time. Our personnel is providing the family with the necessary resources. I'm strongly encouraging everyone to keep the family in their thoughts and respect their privacy during this difficult time. We will not be answering any questions, but we will provide additional information when it becomes available. Any public records request should be filed through our public records section with the Clearwater Police Department. No records will be released today. Our thoughts are with the family, and again, we ask everyone to respect their privacy during this difficult time. Thank you.
On the morning of July 24th, 2025, the world was rocked by the sudden and unexpected death of a wrestling legend, Hulk Hogan. The news broke from Clearwater, Florida, where the 71-year-old was discovered unresponsive in his mansion, an icon who had entertained millions throughout his career. To many, Hogan, born Terry Gene Balea, seemed larger than life, a figure who had overcome countless challenges both in and out of the ring. But on this fateful morning, the very man who had once stood tall in front of thousands of fans was found lifeless, leaving many to wonder what had truly happened.
This is what this business is all about.
Be answering any questions, but we will provide additional information when it becomes available.
At first, the cause of his death appeared to be nothing more than natural. Given Hogan's age and his history of intense physical activity, the initial assumption was that his death was due to natural causes, perhaps a heart attack or stroke. After all, Hogan had undergone numerous surgeries throughout his life, with his body having endured the toll of decades of physicality. So a sudden death wasn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. Local media outlets were quick to report that this was the most likely explanation. However, beneath the surface of these reports, a series of unusual details soon began to surface. These details, while subtle at first, would ultimately lead authorities to reconsider the initial conclusions. What started as an ordinary death in the eyes of the public soon turned into something far more mysterious. What had initially seemed like a routine case of a natural death quickly became the subject of a deeper investigation. The first to find Hulk Hogan's body was his wife, Sky Daly. She had returned home earlier than expected from a wellness retreat, looking forward to seeing her husband in his usual routine. For many years, Hogan had lived a disciplined life, focusing on meditation, physical fitness, and a quieter, more peaceful existence. Sky was accustomed to Hogan's habits, including his time spent in his private home gym, a place where he spent countless hours maintaining his physical strength. As she entered their home that morning, she didn't anticipate anything out of the ordinary. Skye entered through the side door of the mansion, calling out her husband's name, but there was no response. The house, usually filled with the sounds of life, felt unnervingly quiet. She made her way towards the gym, a place that had always felt like Hogan's sanctuary. The gym, with its rows of free weights, resistance machines, and old championship belts on the walls, had been the place where Hogan had pushed his body to its limits, training to maintain his strength and athleticism. But as Skye walked into the gym that morning, something felt off. The room, typically filled with the sounds of weights clanging and the smell of sweat, was unnaturally still. There were no protein shake bottles left on the counters, no towels draped over benches, no evidence of any recent activity. Everything appeared unnervingly clean and sterile, as if it had been tidied up, almost to the point of being staged. Skye stepped further into the room and immediately found Hogan lying motionless on the floor next to a weight bench. There was no sign of a struggle, no indication that something violent had occurred, but still, the scene was unsettling. His skin appeared pale, and there were no signs of life. At that moment, Skye was overwhelmed with panic. Without wasting any time, she called emergency services, and paramedics arrived promptly. They attempted CPR and worked desperately to save Hogan, but despite their best efforts, it was clear that it was too late. Hulk Hogan was pronounced dead at 11:17 a.m. at Morton Plant Hospital in Clearwater, Florida. For a brief moment, the public accepted the idea that Hogan's death was natural, a result of his age and health complications. His career had come at a physical cost, and many believed that his body had simply given out. With years of surgeries, injuries, and the natural wear and tear of a life spent performing in the unforgiving world of professional wrestling, a sudden death didn't seem all that surprising. But as the investigation progressed, small but significant details began to surface that cast doubt on the initial conclusions. These details, seemingly innocuous at first, would soon unravel the case and lead investigators to dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding Hogan's death. The local police initially handled the case, but as they began to examine the scene more closely, they realized that there were discrepancies that didn't align with a simple case of natural causes. First, there was the strange condition of Hogan's gym. As previously mentioned, it was unnervingly clean, almost as if someone had intentionally cleaned and organized it in a way that seemed unnatural. This was not the type of gym Hogan had maintained for years. The gym had always been a place where energy and activity were palpable, but now it seemed frozen in time, like a set piece that had been staged for some purpose. What raised even more alarm bells was the condition of Hogan's high-tech security system. Known for his obsession with privacy and safety, Hogan had invested heavily in the latest security technology for his mansion. Surveillance cameras, motion detectors, and remote access systems had been installed throughout the house. But when the authorities reviewed the system, they discovered something deeply troubling. All the security systems had been manually disabled. This was not a result of a power outage or a malfunction. Someone had intentionally accessed the system and turned it off from inside the house. No alarms had been triggered, and there were no signs of forced entry. This was a key detail that stood out to investigators, as it suggested either Hogan had deactivated the system himself, or that someone with access had been inside the house. At this point, the local police reached out to federal authorities, and the FBI became involved in the investigation. With their expertise in handling complex cases, the FBI quickly took control of the investigation, sifting through every possible piece of evidence, from digital records to physical clues, in the hope of finding answers. As the investigation deepened, the FBI uncovered a significant clue in the form of a mysterious phone call that Hogan had received 3 nights before his death. According to Sky Daily, Hogan had answered the phone late one evening, listened in silence for nearly a minute, and then responded with a single word before hanging up. Sky reported that afterward, Hogan seemed visibly shaken, an expression of fear that she had never seen in him before. She later told investigators that she could sense something had disturbed him deeply. Hogan, a man known for his bravado and confidence, had been left visibly unsettled by the call, which was completely out of character for him. As the investigation into Hulk Hogan's unexpected death continued, the FBI's involvement took the case in a direction that no one could have anticipated. What initially appeared to be a straightforward investigation into the death of a retired wrestler quickly turned into a complex and puzzling mystery, with numerous unanswered questions lingering in the air. With the involvement of federal authorities, every detail was carefully scrutinized, from the condition of the house to the strange circumstances surrounding Hogan's final moments. The first thing that stood out to the FBI was the strange condition of Hogan's home gym, a place that had once been filled with the energy of a man constantly pushing his physical limits. The gym had now become a key point of interest. It was, as Sky Daily had described, unnervingly sterile. Hulk Hogan was a man known for his commitment to fitness, his gym serving as a sanctuary for him, where he could hone his strength and keep himself in top form. The gym had always been filled with signs of life: sweat-soaked towels draped over benches, protein shake bottles scattered about, dumbbells left haphazardly in their places after a grueling workout. Yet, when Sky walked into the room that fateful morning, it appeared untouched, as though the space had been frozen in time. The absence of any sign that the gym had been used recently made it seem unnatural, almost as if someone had cleaned it in a way that was meant to draw attention. Everything about the gym felt wrong. The weights were neatly racked, the floor mats perfectly aligned, and the mirrors wiped down to a shine. There was no trace of the usual sounds of physical exertion: the clanking of weights, the grunting of a man lifting heavy loads, or the smell of fresh rubber from workout equipment. Everything was perfectly in place, arranged to perfection in a way that seemed more like a stage set than a place where someone had spent hours training their body. Sky was struck by the stark contrast between what the gym looked like in that moment and how it had always felt when Hogan was actively using it. She had never seen it like this before, and it only added to the growing sense of unease. The FBI agents who arrived on the scene were equally taken aback by the gym's pristine condition. They immediately began to question what had really happened in the hours before Hogan was found dead. Was it possible that Hogan had simply not been in the gym that morning, despite the fact that his wife had expected to find him there? Or was it more likely that someone had intentionally cleaned the space, perhaps to hide evidence of something that had happened there? To the investigators, the scene felt staged, carefully curated to look as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. It wasn't the kind of gym Hogan would have left behind, especially considering the man's dedication to fitness and the hours he had spent in that very room throughout his career. As the FBI agents continued to examine the mansion, they discovered another alarming detail that raised even more questions. The security system that had been installed throughout the house, a state-of-the-art setup with surveillance cameras, motion detectors, and remote access controls, had been completely disabled. This was a significant revelation, as Hulk Hogan had always been known for his commitment to privacy and security. His mansion, which boasted top-tier technology, had been equipped with some of the most advanced systems available. Yet, when investigators reviewed the footage and examined the system's logs, they found that all of the security features had been manually turned off. The systems had not malfunctioned. There had been no power outages or technical failures. Someone had gone inside the house and intentionally disabled the security system. This was an important piece of evidence, as it suggested that either Hogan himself had deactivated the system, something that seemed out of character for a man so vigilant about his safety, or that someone with intimate knowledge of the system had been inside the house. This raised the possibility that the death of Hulk Hogan may not have been as simple as it first appeared. Could it be that someone had access to his home, and perhaps his life, in a way that no one had initially realized? The lack of forced entry, combined with the fact that the security systems had been disabled, pointed to an unsettling possibility. It suggested that the person who had been inside Hogan's home either had access to the mansion or was in some way familiar with the security setup. The FBI knew that someone with this kind of knowledge could have either been a close associate of Hogan or someone who had worked in the home. It raised questions about whether Hogan had been involved in something that might have led to his death, or if he had been targeted by someone with ulterior motives. The investigation then took a dramatic turn when the FBI uncovered information about a mysterious phone call that Hulk Hogan had received 3 days before his death. According to Sky Daily, Hogan had received a late-night phone call that left him visibly shaken. Sky recalled how Hogan had listened in silence for nearly a minute before saying only one word in response to the caller, and abruptly ending the conversation. Sky said that the moment Hogan hung up the phone, he looked pale and terrified. It was the only time in their relationship that she had seen fear in his eyes. Hogan, a man who had spent years in the spotlight and had dealt with countless challenges, was left visibly disturbed by this call, and he refused to discuss it. This was a crucial moment in the investigation. The phone call, which had left Hogan shaken, was seen as a potential lead by the FBI. Sky's description of Hogan's reaction made it clear that something had deeply unsettled him, something beyond the ordinary. It was not the kind of reaction Hogan had ever had in the past, especially considering his years of experience dealing with the pressures of fame and his public persona. What could have been so disturbing about a simple phone call? The FBI quickly moved to trace the origin of the call, but they faced a major obstacle. The phone number from which the call had come was unlisted, and the signal had bounced through multiple layers of foreign servers, making it nearly impossible to trace the source. Despite their best efforts, the FBI's cybersecurity team struggled to track down where the call had originated. The lack of any clear trail raised even more questions. Who had called Hogan? And why was the call routed through so many different countries, making it almost impossible to identify the caller? The contents of the phone call were classified, but sources close to the investigation hinted that it may hold the key to understanding what had truly happened in the days leading up to Hogan's death. Some investigators even described the call as a trigger, something that set off a chain of events leading to his untimely demise. Could the phone call have been a warning, or was it part of a larger conspiracy that led to Hogan's tragic end? The call, though shrouded in mystery, became a central piece of the puzzle, and the investigation would continue to unravel the significance of that single conversation. As the FBI continued to investigate, they expanded their inquiry beyond just the immediate events surrounding Hogan's death. They began to look deeper into his personal and family history, pulling threads from his past, in an attempt to understand what might have motivated someone to harm him. They uncovered a complex web of relationships, including his contentious divorces, strained relationships with his children, and personal struggles. For the FBI, understanding Hogan's personal life was just as important as examining the physical evidence. They knew that sometimes a person's past could hold the answers to questions that seemed unanswerable. The more they dug, the more they realized that Hulk Hogan's life had been far from simple, with layers of complexity that were not immediately visible to the public. His relationships, his past mistakes, and his emotional struggles may have played a role in the tragic events that unfolded in the days leading up to his death. Despite the many questions that remained unanswered, the FBI pressed on. They knew that the answers to those questions could be found by piecing together the clues that had been left behind. As they worked to uncover the truth, the investigation into Hulk Hogan's death was becoming more intricate and mysterious by the day. Each new detail that emerged only deepened the mystery, leaving investigators and the public alike to wonder what had truly happened to the man who had once been the face of professional wrestling. While the forensic investigation continued, the focus shifted to the curious details surrounding Hogan's final medical procedure. Just 2 months before his death, Hogan had undergone a significant and risky surgery, a 4-level anterior cervical discectomy and fusion (ACDF). This surgery, which involved the removal of damaged discs in his neck and the fusion of the affected vertebrae, was a major procedure that came with considerable risks, especially for someone of Hogan's age. The surgery was not entirely unexpected, given his long history of physical strain from decades of wrestling in the ring. It was well known that the physical demands of professional wrestling had left Hogan with a body that had endured countless injuries and surgeries over the years. Hogan's surgery had raised some concerns among his friends and family, but he appeared to recover well and seemed committed to pushing through the challenges posed by his aging body. He continued to train in his home gym, staying active and focused on maintaining his strength and fitness. However, just weeks after the surgery, a disturbing rumor began to circulate, one that would add to the growing speculation surrounding Hogan's health. The rumor first emerged when Todd Clem, a popular radio host known as Bubba the Love Sponge, claimed that Hogan had slipped into a coma after the surgery. Clem suggested that Hogan's condition was so grave that his family had been called to the hospital to say their final goodbyes. This announcement sent shockwaves through the wrestling community, and fans were left fearing that Hulk Hogan's death might be imminent. Social media exploded with messages of shock and sadness, with many expressing concern about the severity of Hogan's condition. Sky Daly, Hogan's wife, quickly stepped in to quell the growing panic. In a statement posted on social media, she firmly denied the rumors, insisting that Hogan was not in a coma and that his health was improving. She reassured fans that Hogan's heart was strong and that there had been no signs of oxygen deprivation or brain damage. She even posted a photo of Hogan smiling, showing that he was in fact recovering and continuing with his daily activities. Despite her reassurances, the rumors had already taken hold, and the speculation about Hogan's health persisted. The rumor surrounding Hogan's coma continued to swirl, and many began to wonder whether his surgery had triggered a hidden medical issue that might have been responsible for his death. Medical experts suggested that the ACDF surgery carried risks, particularly with regard to the phrenic nerve, which controls the diaphragm and allows a person to breathe. If this nerve had been inadvertently damaged during the procedure, it could have led to breathing difficulties, potentially causing Hogan to stop breathing suddenly. As Sky had described during the 911 call she made on the morning of his death. Despite these concerns, Hogan appeared to bounce back after the surgery. He was seen in public training at his gym, engaging with fans, and living what seemed to be a relatively normal life. However, the events of July 24, 2025, would suggest that the risks of his surgery may have been far more significant than anyone had realized. On that fateful morning, Sky found her husband unresponsive in their home gym, and the frantic call to emergency services revealed that Hogan had suddenly stopped breathing. While initially, his death was attributed to natural causes, the questions surrounding the surgery, combined with the circumstances of his death, made it difficult for investigators to ignore the possibility that something more sinister had occurred. In addition to the medical complications surrounding Hogan's surgery, the investigation also unearthed troubling details about the wrestler's family dynamics. Hogan had been married twice before marrying Sky Daly, and both of his previous marriages had ended in contentious and highly publicized divorces. His first marriage, to Linda Claridge, ended in 2007 after years of media scrutiny and personal struggles. The couple had 2 children together, Brooke and Nick Hogan, and for a time, their family was seen as the epitome of the perfect American household. However, the facade of perfection began to crack when allegations surfaced that Hogan had been involved in an affair with a woman named Christiane Plant. This affair, which Hogan denied, led to public scandal and ultimately contributed to the breakdown of his marriage to Linda. Following the divorce, Hogan's emotional state deteriorated. He admitted to feeling devastated by the end of his marriage, even revealing that he had contemplated suicide during this difficult period. He credited his co-star Ella Ali, who had appeared alongside him on the television show American Gladiators, with helping him get through the darkest days of his life. While he managed to survive the emotional turmoil, the scars of his failed marriage, and the media frenzy that surrounded it would remain with him for years to come. In 2010, Hogan remarried Jennifer McDaniel, but this relationship also faced difficulties. And by 2022, the couple had separated. Despite the lack of public drama during their breakup, it was clear that Hogan's personal life had been marked by a series of emotional challenges. He had struggled to find lasting happiness, and his relationships with both his ex-wives and his children were often strained. It wasn't until he met Sky Daly, a yoga instructor 25 years his junior, that Hogan seemed to find a sense of peace. Sky brought a calming presence into his life, helping him navigate the challenges of his past and find stability in his personal life. In 2023, the couple's relationship took a significant step forward when Hogan proposed to Sky during a wedding reception for actor Corin Neck. Just 2 months later, they were married in a private ceremony at Indian Rocks Baptist Church in Clearwater, Florida. Sky was everything to Hogan, grounding him and providing him with the emotional stability he had long sought. However, despite the calm that Sky brought to his life, the mystery surrounding Hogan's death would soon overshadow their relationship. When the FBI continued to investigate the circumstances of his death, they began to consider the possibility that old wounds had been reopened in Hogan's life. Could unresolved tensions from his past have played a role in his death? The fractured relationships with his children, the bitter divorces, and the financial disputes that had plagued him for years became a point of focus for the investigators. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Hogan's life had been far from simple. The trauma of his past, coupled with the physical toll of his wrestling career, created a complex web of motivations and pressures that had shaped his final years. But as investigators dug deeper into the details of his death, they uncovered yet another chilling revelation, one that would send shockwaves through the investigation and ultimately change the course of the case. Behind the walls of Hogan's mansion, the FBI uncovered something that no one could have anticipated. Hidden in a secret basement room was a collection of files and documents that seemed completely out of place for a retired wrestler. These files, carefully organized and meticulously maintained, appeared to contain sensitive information that raised more questions than answers. One of the most shocking discoveries was a folder dated just 1 day before Hogan's death, which was linked to the mysterious phone call that had so disturbed him. This discovery, if true, added another layer of complexity to the investigation. What was Hogan protecting? Was he being pressured to gather sensitive information for some reason, or had he been involved in something much darker than anyone had imagined? The existence of the secret room, along with the files it contained, suggested that Hogan's life in his final years had been far more complicated and secretive than anyone had realized. Despite the findings, the FBI continued to maintain that there was no conclusive evidence of foul play. The official cause of Hogan's death remained natural, and the investigation was officially closed. However, the leaked information about the secret room in his mansion, combined with the disturbing phone call and the emotional turbulence in Hogan's personal life, left many to wonder whether the true story had been hidden from the public. The whispers of a deeper mystery surrounding his death refused to fade, and the questions about what had really happened in those final days remained unanswered. Hulk Hogan's legacy, built on decades of wrestling, fame and controversy, now seemed to be defined by the unanswered questions that lingered long after his passing. Fans, family members and investigators alike were left grappling with the shadows of Hogan's life, unable to fully comprehend the truth behind the death of a man who had once been a larger-than-life figure. The investigation may have been closed, but the questions surrounding his death were far from over. The public, once again, became divided. Some believed the explanation of natural causes was sufficient, while others, including those within Hogan's inner circle, were determined to find answers that would explain his sudden and mysterious death. This tension would only escalate as new developments emerged, revealing just how complex and mysterious Hogan's life had truly been. Among those pushing for further investigation was Hogan's daughter, Brooke Hogan. Though she had been estranged from her father for some time, Brooke became increasingly vocal in her desire for the truth. She expressed her concerns about the official narrative, pointing out the inconsistencies that seemed to surround her father's passing. Despite her estrangement from Hogan, Brooke had always cared deeply about him, and the sudden and unexplained nature of his death troubled her. At first, Brooke questioned why an autopsy had not been performed immediately. But as she met with police, reviewed body cam footage, and even heard the 911 call Sky Daly made, her perspective started to shift. She came to believe that the natural cause ruling was the correct one, and that no foul play had occurred. However, it wasn't the resolution she had hoped for. Instead, she found herself haunted by the haunting nature of the 911 call. Listening to Sky's panicked voice on the recording made the reality of her father's death all the more difficult to accept. While Brooke came to terms with the official explanation, the public was left with a slew of unanswered questions. Was Hogan's death truly the result of a natural cause, or was there something more behind it? Many fans, particularly within the wrestling community, found it difficult to believe that a man as legendary and influential as Hulk Hogan could meet his end so quietly, without any sort of drama or controversy. For some, the mystery of Hogan's final days seemed to be the perfect end to a career full of ups and downs. But for others, it felt like something was being hidden. In an effort to find clarity, certain members of Hogan's family began to take matters into their own hands. Sky Daly, Hogan's wife, became a central figure in the fight to uncover the truth. Although she had already suffered the shock of finding her husband dead in their home gym, she was determined to learn the full story behind his passing. Her concern was not only for the truth, but for the legacy Hogan had worked so hard to build. Sky believed that something had gone terribly wrong during Hogan's surgery, and she was convinced that his death was in some way connected to it. She began exploring the possibility of filing a medical malpractice lawsuit, arguing that the surgery might have been the cause of Hogan's untimely death. The medical procedure Hogan had undergone just 2 months before his death had been a major surgery, one that carried risks for someone of his age. It was a procedure designed to address the damage done by years of physical strain, but it also came with the possibility of complications. Sky was not alone in her suspicions. The phrenic nerve is critical to the diaphragm's functioning, and if it had been inadvertently severed during the procedure, it could have triggered the breathing issues Hogan experienced in his final moments. Sky's belief in this theory drove her to take legal action, convinced that her husband's death was not the result of mere fate, but of an avoidable medical error. As Sky fought to uncover the truth, Nick Hogan, Hulk's son, also became involved in the legal battles. Nick, who had been a part of his father's life, and had seen firsthand the toll that the wrestling career had taken on Hogan's body, became determined to protect his father's name and legacy. Nick's approach was more focused on defending the family's reputation. He filed a separate lawsuit against radio host Todd Clem, better known as Bubba the Love Sponge, accusing him of defamation and spreading false claims about Hogan's death. Clem had been one of the key figures in fueling the rumors that Hogan's death was not accidental. He had suggested that Hogan's passing was more sinister, even hinting that it could have been a result of foul play. Nick's lawsuit against Clem was part of his effort to prevent any further damage to his family's reputation and ensure that his father's legacy remained intact. At the same time, the investigation into Hogan's death continued to evolve. New pieces of evidence emerged that suggested Hogan may have been hiding something in his final years. The discovery of a secret room within his mansion was one of the most startling revelations to come from the FBI's investigation. Hidden deep within the basement, behind a seemingly ordinary wall, agents uncovered a room filled with meticulously organized files and documents that appeared completely unrelated to Hogan's life as a wrestler. The most startling piece of evidence was a folder dated just 1 day before Hogan's death. The contents of the folder were never publicly disclosed, but the timing of the documents, along with the mysterious phone call Hogan had received days before his death, raised more questions than answers. Rumors began to circulate that Hogan had been gathering sensitive information in the months leading up to his death, possibly in response to growing threats. Some speculated that Hogan had been involved in something far darker than anyone had realized, and that the contents of the hidden room might provide the key to understanding what had truly happened in the final days of his life. The discovery of the room, combined with the cryptic nature of Hogan's final phone call, made it clear that Hogan's life was far more complicated than the public had known. Despite the rumors and the mystery surrounding his final days, the FBI maintained that there was no conclusive evidence of foul play.
The official cause of death remained natural, and the investigation appeared to be winding down. However, for those close to Hogan, including his family, the questions lingered. They were left to wonder whether the truth would ever come to light, or whether Hogan's death would remain shrouded in mystery forever. As time passed, the focus shifted from the investigation to the legacy that Hulk Hogan had left behind. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding his death, Hogan's influence on professional wrestling and pop culture was undeniable. He had transformed the world of wrestling, bringing it to mainstream audiences and becoming a household name in the process. From his iconic moments in the ring to his appearances in television shows and movies, Hogan had transcended the world of wrestling and become a cultural icon. His legacy was cemented in the hearts of fans who had followed his career for decades. The tributes to Hogan continued to pour in after his death, with fans and colleagues alike honoring his contributions to the world of wrestling. In Clearwater, Florida, the city that Hogan had called home for much of his life, murals depicting the legendary wrestler were painted on brick walls and storefronts. These murals, some featuring his famous catchphrase, "What you gonna do, brother?" were acts of devotion from fans who had grown up watching him in action. Even in death, Hogan's presence continued to loom large over the city he loved. But while the tributes were heartfelt, the investigation into Hogan's death continued to weigh heavily on the minds of those closest to him. Was his death truly the result of natural causes, or was there something more to the story? The battle for answers raged on, with Hogan's family at the center of it. Sky, Nick, and Brooke all continued their efforts to protect Hogan's legacy and uncover the truth behind his untimely death. Their pursuit of justice and clarity would keep Hulk Hogan's story alive long after the official investigation had ended. As the investigation came to a close, it was clear that the legacy of Hulk Hogan would remain as complex as the man himself. The public's fascination with his life, career, and death would continue to fuel speculation and debate for years to come. Whether he was a wrestling icon, a troubled man, or someone caught in a web of secrecy, Hogan's story was far from over. In the end, the truth may never be fully known, but the questions surrounding his death would continue to linger, leaving fans and investigators alike to wonder what really happened to the man who had once embodied the spirit of Hulkamania.